never want to, okay, don't want to avail themselves of using their talent. So we're going to talk about that just a little bit. So get your brains thinking. I'm going to remind you with this statement, God gives each of us differing talents and natural abilities. He expects us to use them for his glory and work in this world. Some people think they don't have any talents, but trust me, God didn't make any no talent people. Everybody's got at least one. Studies will tell you that some people have hundreds of talents. And I think sometimes we take things that we do for granted and don't realize they're a talent. So we're going to look at what we think is preventing. I'd like to go back, if I can get somebody turn to 1 Peter 4:10. We read this last week, but I want us to read it again. 1 Peter 4:10, it's very short. Whoever gets there first is welcome to read it.
Humble yourselves before the Lord and he will lift you up. No, that's James.
Each one should use whatever gift he has received to serve others, faithfully administering God's grace in its various forms.
Okay. Do you see any optionality in that statement? Does anybody get a free pass?
Imperative, yeah.
No, it says we're stewards.
Stewards. Each one is to use. No free pass in talents, okay? So I want us to take a look. I've written down a whole page full of things that I think are detriments, not detriments, or things that prevent people from using their talents. Larry.
The first thing that came to my mind was the story in Matthew 25 where you've got the wealthy man who goes off on a trip and gives 3 of his servants, 10 talents, 5 talents, and 2 talents. And the third one, since we're talking about what prevents us, right? When he's confronted by the master, he says, I knew you were a harsh man and I was afraid. So I went and buried the money, the talent that you gave me. And that I was afraid is probably the number one, or certainly in the top 3 reasons, right? Why people don't utilize the gifts that God has given them is because they're just afraid of something.
Absolutely. Very good. And in our very first class, we used Matthew there as our basis for this entire class.
Oh, did you? Oh.
So, no, that's
Perfect.
Your timing is perfect. And I think there's no question that fear is one of the top detriments. What are people afraid of? What is the fear, Tom?
I think some people are afraid to embarrass themselves if they do something wrong. If they get up in front of the congregation and they serve that way, they're afraid that they'll say something wrong or do something wrong or not be able to do what they're supposed to do. So I think a fear of failure might be part of it too. Just, not being able to do something in front of people.
Fear of failure.
I know I felt unqualified.
Or another one is unqualified. Hold that one. Let's come back to fear of failure for a second. Let's assume that what Tom just described, somebody stands up either in a class like this or before the congregation and messes up. I mean, maybe they say something that didn't come out the right way, this type of thing. What do we do with that? How do we handle that?
Supposed to handle it with love, like, somebody doesn't, or the scripture's understanding to one person may not be the way it's supposed to be.
Sure.
So, and that's the purpose for these classes, so.
Your key, handle it with love. Betty, then Troy.
Going along with what Sue said, share with them a time that you messed up.
There you go.
Yeah. It's nice to know that everybody can feel that someone else has made similar mistakes. Exactly. Troy.
Yeah, I was just thinking in some way that person, as long as they understand that they messed up, they need to be encouraged in some way, and that probably is one way to do it, to recognize they're not the only one, who's ever messed up before or whatever, so I mean, it's now if the person doesn't understand that they messed up, that's another story, then you've got to go from there. But
Hey, Larry, did you?
Yeah, really the question you're asking can be addressed from two perspectives, because you say, how do we handle a situation like that, right? Well, the first thing my mind was drawn to is how do you handle it when someone kind of demonstrates the courage and then messes up, right? And I think that's what we're mostly talking about. What I would say that we should also consider, maybe even more seriously, is how do we encourage the people to take the first step to get up and do it in the first place, right? And there is, all kinds of mentoring and leadership and different things like that I think are sorely lacking in most like local congregations. We can see universities and schools and different things, but to have some kind of mentoring program at a local level, I think, to help bring people up in those various giftedness would probably go a long way to that as well.
Very good point. Very good. Tom?
I think we learn from our mistakes. And I think if you present it, on top of what Betty said and Troy and others, we learn from our mistakes. And even in the business world, if you have a group of people and they're not making mistakes, most of the time they're not growing. They're not getting better. They're not doing what they need to be doing. So if you present it that way with the love and with the understanding that we've done things ourselves, but we grow from that. We've gotten better at it. And we recognize it.
Yeah. I'll give you, many years ago, I did a communion message here, and I worked on that communion message. And I know what I wanted to say, but the way it came out was not, I didn't do it. I mean, it didn't come out the way I thought it would.
Happens to.
Afterwards, elder at that time, Ken Dickerman, grabbed me and he said, let's go have a chat. And in a very positive way, we went over, my communion message and showed me a couple of faults. And he was totally right, but it was the way he did it. It was the way he did it. So now probably the next one or two communion messages I did, I was probably a little bit more careful. But had he gotten me and said, that was an absolute disaster, and don't you ever go up there and do something like, it would have been a turnoff. So mature Christians have a real responsibility to help people come over their fears or come over their errors if something like that happens. Jack, then Jill.
I think it's important, and maybe a talent. Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry. Oh, Jack and Jill.
Jill. Okay.
Too bad Jerry's not here. It'd be Tom and Jerry.
I think there's a lot of talent involved in being critical of someone else's talent in the right way. I think it's important, like your example, that if we do fail, and we're going to fail, we're human. And so we're going to stumble some way, somehow. I have opening prayer this morning. I'm pretty fearful of that. Okay? I know what I want to say, but like you, I sometimes find myself groping and reaching for words that are the right things to say. And if somebody were to say, want to instruct me on a better way to do it, then there's a lot of talent in that ability to do that so that I'm not felt
Put down.
shut down and put down.
Perfect. Totally. Jill.
I was going to say, to tag on to what you were saying, Richard, we have to be empathetic with one another.
Empathetic.
And also, when we are trying to encourage each other, we have to say the positive. That goes a long way, but then also knowing the term, know your audience. It's the same thing with your children. The approach that we use with Nicole, it's not necessarily the approach that we use with Andrew, because it doesn't work based on just who they are and their personality. Sometimes it's tough love, and sometimes it's that a girl, or it'll be all right, but let's do this, it's different.
Sure. Thank you. Nick, this ought to be music to your ears as a newer Christian in here. Trust me. If you mess up one day, we all have. Okay, so that's the beauty.
I heard somebody else say that I learned more when I was trying to teach.
Oh, yeah.
But I mean, God is continuing to teach all of us. So if we stop at, I'm not going to do it because I don't know how, we're never going to get anywhere.
Very good. Very good. That's kind of, I'll come right to you, Troy. That's kind of, sometimes you've got to step out in faith and overcome those fears a little bit. Take a leap and try it. Especially with teaching, if you feel like you might like to teach and have never taught, get with somebody who is teaching and let them help bring you along, give you little by little. Absolutely. Troy.
Yeah, I heard a phrase the other day. I think it's absolutely true, although it's not something that we really want to hear. It's that we learn more from our failures than we do from our successes. But that's only if we let it. I mean, if we let the fail, if we look and see what we did wrong and how to improve it, if we just sit there and wallow in our failure, then that's not going to let us learn anything. So.
And let's not confuse the talents that we have here in the church, because our boss is God. Let's don't confuse that with the talents that we have in the workplace.
True.
It's a totally different world.
Absolutely.
And God is very forgiving.
Absolutely.
Okay, we've got a lot more. What are some other things you think might prevent somebody from using their talents? Oh, I'm sorry, somebody up there?
Gary?
Gary.
Richard, I think one of the things I think that's probably hindered folks over the last couple of years is the lack of opportunity. Just there are different talents I think that are out there that we could use, but by not being together as much, I think the lack of opportunity sometimes can be a hindrance as well, because we're not focusing on all of those things that they can do during some of these difficult times.
I would grant you that certainly COVID and being shut in and shut off at times has caused some issues. Yet at the same time, I would challenge anybody to find ways to overcome those issues.
Sure.
And what can we do with them? But I do agree with you, Gary, on the comment. Kim?
I think there are times when you want to do things or when you have suggestions. And I think any of you know me, I'll come running. And so finally, this last shot that I took, I said, forget it. I know everybody can be encouraged with a car, and that's not something I would need permission to do. So I did it. And
that was
three people actually, Mike and I did not send our names out as a person to get something back. We didn't do that at all. We matched everybody with everybody else. And still 3 people have responded by writing us a note back, which, that's pretty cool. And I wasn't expecting that, but I just wanted to do something. So sometimes it may be a desire to do something, even at your workplace, a way that you can see an improvement and it's not met with an acceptance or or sometimes it might be a good idea, but it's not something that's implemented. And then if you get continuously, it's okay, but it's not ever acting on it, can make you maybe want to give up and not continue to try.
Yeah. Well,
That's a major one.
yeah, and Kim, you and Mike are to be commended. You did exactly what I just said, found a way to overcome some of this being closed in. And on top of doing it, you made it easy for us, including addressing the envelope and stamp and putting the card in. So I think that was an excellent idea. All right, let's hit home with a hard one.
Pride.
Pride. Okay, that's a good hard one. How does pride come into preventing people, Larry?
Maybe I'm asked to do something I think is beneath my talent level. And as a result of that, I don't want to, even though it may be a gift and this is something I know how to do, I choose not to do it because I think that kind of work is beneath me.
Very good. Tom, then I'll come back.
Somebody has hurt your feelings in the past. You got up there, you did what you're supposed to do, or you did something outside for somebody that you thought was right, that thought was good, and you were criticized for it, and your pride got in the way, and you said, well, I'm just not going to do that anymore. I'm not going to do anything. If they don't want me, if I'm not good enough for them, I'm just not going to serve anymore.
Very good.
That's pride, yeah. Exactly right.
I think one reason we might not use our talents is that takes commitment and time. And if we don't want to do it, we don't want to prioritize do that instead of something else.
Now, we'll go there right now. I want to come back to pride for just a second. Again, we identify the problem. How do we help those people fix that problem? I think that's the very important part. So more mature Christians have got to step up and try to work with that. And because pride, if you let pride get into you, it's going to destroy you. So, that's really critical.
And one of the challenges with approaching someone that maybe, if you've identified me as being prideful overall or in a given situation, because of that pride, if you try to approach me, oftentimes I'm going to get defensive and rather than receiving that humbly. So that's what makes pride so much more difficult to be able to work through, is because it involves hurt feelings sometimes, but generally it's just, my ego being inflated.
Tremendous responsibility when you go to talk to a brother or sister in those kind of situations. Know what you're doing and understand. Now, I want to come back to time because I think that's one of the big ones. So what is the time issue? Why do we not have time, Charlotte?
Well, we put other things we place other things more important.
Other things more important is one of them. What else?
I started to say just being lazy earlier, but I just got too tired and decided not to say it.
Fear was number one on my list. Laziness is number 2, and time is number 3. The way I've got them. So let's stay with time for just a second.
Sometimes I find that you can say yes to too many things. You have good intentions and you want to help here, here, and here, and then nothing gets done.
That's true too. That's true too. All right, Troy, then Kim.
So maybe another way to couch the time problem is the priorities. Priorities, what's more important? We have to get our priorities in the right order. And it's not always cut and dry. I mean, sometimes, it can be between two things that are good. Which one's better? We can't do both of them, Sure.
You can count on Troy to start the meddling part. Priorities, that's true. And it's another one I have on here is discipline. All of that, the time, the priorities, the discipline, we're making decisions. It's a conscious choice, And yet I do totally agree with Charlotte in one of her comments. Some people say yes to everything and it doesn't get done. Or I believe the intentions are well, and then you look at what they agree to do and it just becomes overwhelming. So you've got to be, you can't do everything. One of the statements I've got in here somewhere says, I can't do everything, but I can do something.
Right.
So Tom?
It leads us into another reason why is this, that you're not motivated. It may be that, you feel like you served enough. You live your life full of service. You've taught, you've done all these things, and you say, okay, it's time for me to rest. It's time for other people to do these things. And you're just not motivated to do that. And that goes with young people too. I mean, it's like, well, I got school, I got all these things I need to do, and I just can't do it right now. I don't still feel motivated to do it. And see, that comes from the heart and the head. So that's what we need to do to encourage them, is to go ahead and show the importance of it and the priorities we talked about.
I didn't have that one, lack of motivation. Maybe they just don't know. Yeah. Kim, did you have something to say? I'm sorry.
This might fall a little bit more into pride, but when you see something that needs to be done and you offer to do it, and then it meets with perfection or whatever, and then later on someone will come back and say, well, yeah, I need for you to do that, or I just don't have time now. And it may be not so much that you may not have the time, but it may be a combination of both time and pride.
It could be.
Yep.
I'm not sure what category this would fall under, but sometimes we might just feel like our efforts is just a drop in the ocean. There's too much to do. I can't, what I'm doing is not making much of a difference. It doesn't, but the answer to that lies, it's not simple, but it lies in the fact that God can take what we can offer and multiply it. God can take what we, he can do. And it's a faith issue.
I had on here, not good enough. We might think we're not good enough, or we might think what we're talking about doing doesn't amount to a whole lot. That's not our decision to make on that, And you don't know the example of a pebble, getting thrown into still water. I mean, the ripples that come even from a small pebble, small act of kindness, anything. You just don't know what could be the need that day. So don't ever think you're not good enough or your idea isn't good enough. More, Betty.
I think sometimes people just don't have the mindset of service and using.
True. That's true.
And it may be because the home they grew up in, that was not stressed. They did not see their parents in service in any way. And perhaps when they worshiped, it was with a congregation that really wasn't an important part. They met together, they worshiped, and that was about it. They don't have that mindset instilled in them, of how to do it and exactly what it is, what it involves.
I didn't have that down, and I absolutely love that. We're going to stay on that one for a second. Sherry?
This goes along with what Betty said. Another part of that could be we're not paying attention to the Spirit, because if we're listening to the Spirit and having that mindset, then we're going to see the open doors. If we're tuned off to that, it's going to pass us by.
Really good. Mm-hmm. Anybody else on that?
Well, it's not exactly on that, but I guess it could kind of play into that. But I notice this a lot with especially like the younger, like the youth or new Christians, is that they just don't know what they're able to do. They don't know what their talent is. And I think it's up to them to try and figure that out, but it's also up to everybody else to try and help them and mentor them in like showing them different options they have and getting them to try out different things to see what they're good at.
I think it's easy to sit back and be critical of people that you see not doing a whole lot, not doing much, when we ought to be sitting back and going, how can we encourage that person? How can we help that person? I really hadn't thought about what Betty said. This church is really unique in service and being tied as a family. A lot of churches, I know, because I used to go to a Catholic church many years ago. I don't think we ever discussed family in Catholic church. You basically went, service once a week and you just moved on. There wasn't a whole lot. I think they tried to make some strides over that as years have gone by. But a lot of people come into this setting, never have been exposed to what the word really is. And if you're walking in step with God, it's impossible not to use your talents. It's just going to come natural.
There's a great number of people out there that come from denominations that feel that you go to Sunday morning worship and that's all you need to do. You don't need to do anything else. Sunday morning is all you need to take care of. And if they're approached about, doing service or doing something else, or say, well, why would I need to do that? I worship on Sunday morning. That's all I need to do. And that's the mindset, unfortunately, of some people. And we need to just get them, like Sherry said, get them to the motivation, to have it in their mind and in their heart that you need to do this service. The Bible tells you need to serve. You need to use the talents that you have and use all the things that we've talked about to get them to understand that it's not enough just to worship. You need to go ahead and use the talents that you have for the good of the church so it can grow.
I think it's important to remember too that using our talents extends past these four walls. And it's not just about what we do on Sunday, in service or Wednesday nights or whatever. It's about how we're helping our community.
Totally.
or inviting people to our home or whatever that may look like. But it's easy to just think about like, okay, why aren't you serving on Sunday mornings or different things? But we might not see what they're doing outside of church too. And so we need to not be too critical in that way either. Like, we don't know what other people are doing on their own time necessarily.
That's true.
Troy?
I'm not at all going to diminish what we do here, but at the same time, worship is not just what we do here.
Right.
Worship is what we do in our lives. Our service to God is worship to God.
Right.
And it must go beyond the gathering of ourselves together. It must include that, but it must go beyond that.
To me, that's where we get fulfilled.
Yes.
You get fulfilled when you're out there using your talents, serving, et cetera. Not quite laziness. How about procrastination?
No.
Sure. That was the other thing I was going to say, but it's.
We're just putting it off.
We can all be good procrastinators. There's no question. Yeah, it's just another one. 1 Peter 4:10 talks about the stewardship responsibility. Some of us are just poor stewards. We talked about how to determine our talents, and one of them before was to look inside, take a deep dive inside. Once we've started that, are we doing what we know we can do? Or can we help somebody who's having trouble getting it done? The stewardship part is extremely important. Sue?
I thought about another one that, may be a factor. We emphasize too much in the Church of Christ that we are not saved by works. That a lot of people are like, well, I don't have to do that. So even though, true believers do understand that that is a true statement. However, it's all tied in. So if you don't act on your belief, then what good is it really? But at the same time, it kind of like let us put our guard down and not participate, not pay attention. I don't know.
I would submit to you that in using our talents and serving, if we're in lockstep with God, when we do it, it's not work.
Yeah, well, see.
You would never think about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure.
Exactly. But it is all together, like I step up to do something to help somebody, but in return, it makes me feel a whole lot better. I never understood that concept. It's God, I know, but I don't know how that works, and I'm not going to question it, but.
It's more blessed to give than to receive.
I tell you.
There's another one, and we hit on this a week or two ago. I mentioned it just briefly. Some people can legitimately have the concern that by doing too much or over and above or showing that they can do this is almost appears as if they might feel that they're bragging. That they're fearful of people thinking, that I'm doing this and I'm showing off. That should never happen. But, to me, if you've got the talent, you've got the ability, you've got the knowledge, you share it. Troy and Larry are both ministers in the Word, have got a ton of more knowledge than probably the bulk of us in this room. I love every time you make a comment in Bible class or anything else. I don't ever want you to feel like, oh boy, there goes Troy again, or there goes Larry again, or whatever, Doesn't do it as much anymore because of his throat. But whenever he would make a comment in all the years, that's where the rest of us glean and learn from that. So don't be fearful that because you've got this talent or ability that you're showing off. I don't think we ever think that, but there are people who could have that concern. If we have a need in the church for accounting, a lot of time the accountants in the church go, I don't want to do that, because that's what I do. We want that talent, You kind of see where I'm at with that? That makes sense? Tom?
I think some people are intimidated by the knowledge that other people have.
Oh,
I think, they want to make a comment.
Yes.
Okay. They say, wow, this is not going to come across as being very smart, and I can't think of a verse and I'm just not going to say nothing. I mean, it gets to be that it's not prideful, but it's part of the fear. And it is a little prideful because they don't want to get themselves embarrassed. So we need to encourage, like you do, and all of our teachers and all of us together, we want to hear comments, no matter who it is, whether it is, because, you learn from that, like you said.
And if you've got talents and you're showing them, people are going to learn from following what you do.
Absolutely.
There's no question. They may have this fear, I can't do that. They watch somebody else do it and go, I can do that. So we're walking examples every day, what we're doing with that. So I would love to see everything in this church turn everything upside down. I'd much rather have 80% of the people.
Sure.
Instead of smaller amount. And I don't know what the number is, it's immaterial, but I do know this. If we're all working, God's glory is going to shine through and it'll be a blessing to him and to each and every one of us. So,
That's right.
all right, we'll switch gears a little bit. I said we would talk about Eric Little a little for those of you who got in here early. We had the Chariots of Fire theme song going on. Eric Little was a Scottish runner back in I guess around the 40s or so. I think he was born in 1920, but who remembers the story of Chariots of Fire or remembers anything about Eric Little?
He was a minister.
And he was also a minister?
He refused to run in an Olympic event for which he was very well qualified and maybe even favored because that particular event was on a Sunday. And as a result of that refusal to run that one, they put him into, I think the 200 meter was the substitute, if I'm not mistaken. And I think he ended up winning that one as well, but because that one was held on Saturday or another day or a day other than Sunday.
Yeah. You are very, very close. I mean, just the facts are off just a little bit. So I'm going to read a short bio on Eric Little to you. And you remember a week or two ago, we talked about Larry Bird, first time he played against Michael Jordan and the talents Michael had. I'm not necessarily trying to raise up athletes with their talent, but I think the example here is people in certain positions really have the ability to make tremendous impact. Everybody has the ability to make impact, and the little ones count and the big ones count. But this is quite a story, and the movie is basically true. But Mr. Little had a rough life. Let me just read this to you. Eric Little was a Scottish Olympic champion at 400 meters and also a famous Christian missionary. His life was captured in the film Chariots of Fire. Although his parents were Scottish, Eric Little was both born and died in China. He was born on January 16th in the city of Tianjin in northeast China. He was sent to Eltham College, a Christian boarding school, for 12 years in England. In 1921, he moved to Edinburgh University, where he studied science. From his school days, he was an outstanding sportsman, excelling in short distance running, rugby, and cricket. In 1922 and 23, he played rugby for Scotland. However, it was running that he really excelled at, and after setting a new British record in 1923 in the 100-yard sprint, he was considered a great prospect for the Olympics in 1924. Eric Little was a committed Christian. During the Paris Olympics, because the qualifying heats of the 100-meter sprint were held on Sunday, he withdrew from the race, a race considered to be his strongest. Instead, he concentrated on the 400 meters as the race schedule did not involve a Sunday. Little was considered to be a strong favorite for the race. Prior to the final, the U.S. Olympic representative slipped a piece of paper into his hand. It included the words from 1 Samuel 2:30, "Those who honor me, I will honor." Little was said to say, "The secret of my success over the 400 meters is that I run the first 200 meters as fast as I can. Then for the second 200 meters, with God's help, I run faster." He also won the bronze in the 200 meter. Liddell's running style was unorthodox. Towards the end of the race, he would fling his head back with his mouth wide open, appearing to gasp for breath. And if you go back and Google the songs, they show the thing, and that's exactly what he looked as he grows. His mouth is wide open. So, in 1925, Liddell returned to northern China to serve as a missionary. Liddell married Florence McKenzie, a Canadian missionary. They had 3 daughters. In 1941, the advancing Japanese army pressed Liddell and his family to flee for a rural mission station. Liddell was kept very busy dealing with the stream of locals who came to the station for medical treatment and food. In 1943, the Japanese reached the mission location and Liddell was put in an internment camp. Aggravated by the shortage of food and medical treatment, Liddell developed a brain tumor and suffered severe ill health. Many camp internees attested to the strong moral character of Liddell. He was seen as a great unifying force, helped to ease tensions through his selflessness and impartiality. In a book about his life, Norman Cliff says, he was the finest Christian gentleman it had been my pleasure to meet. In all the time in the camp, I never heard him say a bad word about anybody. A fellow internee, Stephen Metcalf, later wrote of Liddell, he gave me 2 things. One was his worn out running shoes, but the best thing he gave me was his baton of forgiveness. He taught me to love my enemies, the Japanese, and to pray for them. He died in 1945, 5 months after he was released from the camp. Tremendous impact. Also in the movie, there's a section where his sister berates him about running. She did not want him to even run. And I think this was the quote. His sister berated him for leaving God's work in China, training and run races all over the world. Liddell replied to his sister, I believe God made me fast and that it gives him pleasure when I run. He won the gold medal in the 1924 Olympics and gave public testimony to his Christian faith that was reported around the world. So used his talents, so that's why I said all our talents are different. You wouldn't expect, now, yes, he was a missionary as well, but that it comes from being a runner, but he had a stage, he had the ability, he was known. Every one of us have a stage. It might be smaller, but the impact can still be just as great.
It seems to me that he acknowledged God in all he did. And that's what the word tells us to do.
Absolutely did.
Even if you have just one small talent, okay? You're going to influence somebody with that. And regardless if you use it sparingly or use it, quite a bit, you're going to make an impact. Just like those that have lots of talents, those that have some talents, the impact is what's important on this. How you are going to do this in your everyday life, how you impact your neighbors, okay? How you impact the people that you work with, how you impact the people that you recreation with. You play golf, you play tennis, whatever it is. All those people are impacted by the talent that you use. And it's going to be like dominoes. They're going to impact somebody, et cetera, if things work out the way, that's the plan for us. And Sue talked about faith a little bit. What we believe, our faith, it says in James, faith without works is dead. So we need to work. We need to use our faith. We need to be out there 24/7, okay, showing ourselves as a Christian and using the talents that we have.
The key to what you just said is that we work for God.
Absolutely.
Not for our own glory.
Absolutely.
And realizing without God, we are nothing.
Absolutely.
Just to tie on to what the 2 gentlemen said here. I think at the root of all of this, Richard, is when we do not serve, when we do not use our talents, our gifts, whatever it is, when we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing, at the very root of that is because we do not know God as well as we need to.
Yep.
Because if we truly know God, we have that relationship with him, we respond like Paul did when he wrote to the Corinthians, he says, "For the love of Christ compels me." Right? It was his knowledge, his relationship with God that compelled him to do what he did. And he goes on to say, having concluded this, that one died for all, therefore all died, and he died for all so that, right? This is a purpose statement. So that he died for all, so that they who live might no longer live for themselves, but for him who died and rose again on their behalf.
Amen.
Excellent.
So
Amen.
it's, well, I'll just close it with that.
We are just closing. I want to be certain that
Richard, I just wanted to say something. We've talked about a lot of things, reasons why we do, why we don't. But leadership is one of the most important things. And I can attribute anything that I am able to do to God and good people that God has put in my life. And one of the people that I give credit to for anything that I have ever been able to do in the church is Malcolm Lamons, who preached for us for years at the old Edgewood congregation. And he was saying, don't tell me you can't. Don't tell me you're afraid. God wants you to do, and you can do with his help. And if you're afraid, you do it again and again and again until you're not afraid. He said, this is just what a Christian man does.
That's right.
And man, when he assigned me to speak for the congregation, I had to go up, though, throw up 3 times before I could. Everybody looking at me up there with front row. Two quick things. I love this class because you always give me a lead in to close or something. That is perfect. Let me just read this last thing I was going to share with you. So many times we say that we can't serve God because we aren't whatever is needed. We're not talented enough, we're smart enough, or whatever. But if you are in covenant with Jesus Christ, he is responsible for covering your weaknesses and for being your strength. He will give you abilities for your disabilities. That is basically what. And that's what Israel failed to grasp when God says, don't be afraid, I will go before you. And I look back on my life and seen where he just cleared the path for me. I know it was through God and not me. And he's made that promise to every person in this room.
Absolutely.
I will go before you.
Be strong and courageous.
Yes.
Yeah, that we also need to remember to encourage our youth and new Christians. Just because we have a youth minister doesn't mean that everything falls on him. You know, we have young men serving in the church. We have young women doing things that we don't even see. And we have new Christians doing things that we don't see as well. So let's encourage them, not just rely on ministers or not rely on elders or deacons or teachers. Let's all encourage our young people and our new Christians.
I'm going to give you one last thing. Everybody in this room has this talent. There's no question in my mind. And you've got an opportunity to use it today after services. Get in your car, get in the line that's going to go to Merle Mason's house, and she will be so encouraged. That's an easy one that everybody can do. You won't get any criticism unless you run into the person in front of you. No, I'm just kidding.
Roads are wet, be careful.
Tom, Gary, thank you guys. Thank all of you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Take care.